I just wanted to ask you, before we start talking about the personalities involved, there's a line in your piece that suggests that a lot of people think a leadership contest come May is pretty inevitable. I mean, are we looking at that as the most likely timeline?
Yeah, I mean, I know that this annoys some listeners, talking about a leadership contest that isn't officially happening. But believe me, in Parliament, it's happening. And it feels inevitable, even though it's hard to know when it would be. I mean, I think I basically never speak to anyone who thinks that Keir Starmer will be Prime Minister by next Christmas. Or, well, will he do another conference speech? I really doubt it, given just where everyone seems to be. So May is the sort of obvious time because Labour's set to, is on course to do pretty badly in Scotland and Wales and in local elections. They're really trying
the London councils are up then as well.
Yeah. So even though they're trying to avoid that fate, but everyone is sort of braced for it to be pretty bad, including number 10, they would say, but it's midterm, that's sort of inevitable. It doesn't mean much, doesn't mean you should get rid of you should get rid of the leader, but everyone's almost a little bit resigned to May going badly. So that feels like an obvious point, but there's just a sense of inevitability to it happening at some point, and it doesn't have to, someone was saying to me, it doesn't have to be January or May, it could be any time. There's so many frustrated MPs. You only need 80 to get one name together and put it forward. It could be precipitated by some kind of crisis. It could be May. Keir Starmer might just decide he's had enough and step down. People don't discount that idea. Yeah. But there's just a feeling by next summer, there will be a contest of some kind, and people are already talking about it and getting ready, which is why, even though it's not officially happening, the column is on that this week. Yeah,
it's interesting, that idea of there doesn't even have to be a leadership contest for this to happen. I was speaking to someone who knows sort of how Keir Starmer works quite well, and their analysis of it was, if they do as badly as is expected in these May elections, then he may feel, with his strong sense of duty, it is time for me to stand down. And then, you don't even need sort of MPs to be manoeuvring in the background for something to happen.
Well, exactly. And that's why that briefing that we had a few weeks ago, where Wes Streeting was accused of a coup, was interesting, because the main point of that briefing was really to say that Keir Starmer would stand in any contest and try to face down any threat. I mean, it's just so interesting because some people do believe that around the Labour Party, and they think that complicates matters if Keir were to stand again. But loads of people just don't buy that. They just don't know if that tallies with his personality. I'm not sure. I've heard opposing views, but if you're in a position where you have led your party to come third in Wales, really, really devastating defeat, you're hemorrhaging support all around the country in very different kinds of seats. Like, do we see ruthless Keir Starmer, who actually decides to fight on, or is it actually that sort of honourable Keir Starmer who nearly resigned after Hartlepool?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it would also depend what the alternative was. So I've heard from people, again, who put it both ways, but one of the points that I've heard is that if he was going to do the magnanimous, dutiful thing and step down, he would want that to be in order to pave the way for something a lot smoother for a successor, and to have a plan in place and to not have it get really messy.
With lots of infighting.
With lots of different factions. One of the things that happens in leadership contests with any party at any point is that the leadership contest itself damages the party inevitably, because the public can see what's going on, and you're just handing ammunition to opposition parties because they have, in the words of your MPs themselves, why they think that X person is awful, or Y person would be a disaster. So I think stage managing that process to create as little damage as possible would be important, and that brings us back to, okay, what does that process look like, and who is waiting in the wings, and is there a way of doing it with minimal bloodletting, I suppose.
Yeah. And so who is waiting in the wings, Ailbhe? Because we had those briefings against Wes Streeting, but there are other individuals who could be up for the job.
Yeah, well, it's, I quote one person in the magazine this week, sort of describing it like Wes Streeting is the only officially declared candidate after those number 10 briefings. He's just sitting there and, you know, he's getting on with the day job. He says that, you know, he's drawn a line under all of that. Number 10 has too. But realistically, everyone thinks he's running now and he doesn't actually need to do anything. And that's kind of the beauty of the past few weeks, that like they have fired the starting gun on his leadership campaign. He just doesn't need to do anything, looks loyal, and any MPs thinking about the alternatives kind of know that he's an option. So really that means that the framing is then, if you're from a different part of the party, it's like, actually, how do we stop Wes Streeting?
Right.
And so that's much less clear. Like the soft left doesn't really have a candidate, or certainly that's what Wes Streeting's supporters say. So I kind of wanted to explore that idea. There are a lot of them. Some of them actually got cut from the final copy because it was too long.
Too many names.
There are more names in the mix than are in the final version. But and then we kind of come to Angela Rayner as the big one.
Yeah, but there are other obstacles in Wes Streeting's way, aren't there, other than the soft left organising against him, Rachel?
So the thing that I just keep coming back to with Wes Streeting is this number 528, which is his majority. So one of the key things that you want in a party leader is somebody who's not going to lose their seat. I'm not sure if it feels like it was a million years ago, but in the run-up to 2024, when the polls were looking so bad for the Conservatives, there was a suggestion that Rishi Sunak might lose his seat, and like he didn't. But that is a humiliation on a level that you just don't want to go there. Now, one of the things that pollsters keep saying to all of us is there's no such thing as a safe Labour seat anymore. There's no such thing as a safe Tory seat. It's all so fragmented and it's so difficult to predict. You know, maybe 528 is no less secure than other MPs who have majorities that look like they're in the thousands or tens of thousands, because it's just all so precarious at the moment. But I would be concerned about that. I would be aware about that. And the other thing I would consider, and this comes down to the soft left not having their own candidate, is the upset, the frustration among Labour MPs. Like that across the board. Some of them are frustrated because they think the government has gone in completely the wrong direction. And some of them are frustrated because the polls are really bad. And some of them are frustrated because they think the polls are really bad because the government has gone in the wrong direction. And those are all slightly different motivations. Do you want a leader who you think would improve the party's positioning in the polls? Or do you want a leader who would take the party in the direction that you think, you know, best embodies Labour values? Now, obviously, if you're an MP who thinks that X positioning embodies Labour values, you also must believe in your heart of hearts that it's electorally compelling as well. But I think there is an ideology practicality question as well. I mean, Wes Streeting's a very good communicator. He is also very much not from the soft left of the party, regardless of some of the comments that he's made in the last 6 months or so, moving himself in that direction. So would you take someone who was ideologically from a different faction if you thought he was more electorally successful? Like that's a value judgment to weigh up.
And we've spoken about the challenges of his constituency. I mean, the assumption is from Labour campaigners who I've spoken to is that seat is lost and he'd have to find a safer seat in order to be leader. There's also the Labour membership as well, isn't there?
Well, on his seat, I guess the people around him would say that last time the incumbents basically weren't allowed to run campaigns in their seats.
Okay.
And so I think that there was a kind of last minute realisation that he was in trouble and a very quick get out the vote campaign at the last minute where they were organising. But basically for the first time ever at the last election, Wes Streeting, you know, for reasons beyond his control, wasn't really able to organise in his seat. And
explain that because he was helping with other seats that they
because this was the whole Morgan McSweeney election strategy, where you kind of find the sweet spot. You don't waste any time on seats that you've already banked, and you don't waste any time on seats that are beyond your reach. You're kind of just trying to expand the majority by campaigning in those places where it will really make a difference. And that worked brilliantly overall, but it was where those Gaza independents stood and where there was a sort of big green force where that didn't work.
Didn't people get into trouble for campaigning in the wrong seats?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
and,
there were consequences. They got told off.
Yeah, I mean, there were loads of examples of that. I mean, the most prominent one was the Labour candidate in Clacton, who was selected when that was not really considered a competitive seat, and then suddenly found himself up against Nigel Farage, who entered the contest. He wanted to actually just mount a fight against him, sort of on principle, and, you know, potentially prevent Nigel Farage, or at least just sort of reduce the majority that he would get. And yeah, he got into trouble for that. But there were loads of examples privately of people being told, why are you top of this list of sort of voter engagement when you're not on the list of safe seats? So, you know, people in Wes Streeting's constituency, his local members, would have been sent to Chingford and Woodford Green, or to
Which they also lost, but anyway.
the places where they felt like it would matter.
Yeah.
But so, to come back to the 528, I guess that's where there wasn't really a proper campaign, and the issue around Gaza was at its sort of most sensitive and difficult. And I think that there is still a sense of betrayal among a lot of Labour voters over that issue. But I think the hope among people in seats like that is that they have kind of done the work to regain a bit of that trust, and basically that, like, as things improve in the Middle East, that issue is like going further down the agenda. I think also there's the way that Wes Streeting has sort of, he and his supporters would say out of conviction rather than just to hold on to the seat, but he has kind of taken a different line on Gaza to the rest of his colleagues, or some of his colleagues. So I think that, yeah, I mean, there's so many rumours about a chicken run, but Wes Streeting has made such a thing of this being his home seat. He didn't move there to stand. This is his home. He fought there. He's a fighter, and sort of on principle, he would say. So it's tricky, but I think also his allies would say that it's not as difficult as that number, the 528, looks.
Yeah, and in a leadership election in the Labour Party, you need the membership to be on side, don't you? And that's trickier for Wes Streeting than whichever candidate from the soft left might be up against him, because he is the representative of more of the right of the party. It could be a coronation, though. In your column, that's something someone suggests to you, Ailbhe.
Oh yeah, but really to knock it down, because really the focus of the column is like, what's the soft left up to and what's Angela Rayner up to. There was this story in the Times that Wes Streeting's allies were calling for a coronation, which is not really a thing you can call for. You can't just sort of make it happen. You just saying you want.
Stop trying to make coronation happen.
Saying you want one isn't going to make it happen. And it actually, I thought, was a really just interesting indicator of where other parts of the party really are on that, because in the sort of number 10 versus Wes Streeting fight, people sided with Wes Streeting. Got a lot of support for that. And I think lots of people across the Labour Party think he's doing a good job at health. And he's done quite a lot of progressive things that the whole party can get behind on sort of medical misogyny and men's mental health. He's done difficult things as well. But, you get some soft left MPs who are sort of now quite supportive of Wes Streeting. But it's only when you have a moment where it's briefed to the Times that he should have a coronation that people really hit back and say, no way. So I had lots of leading people from parts of the soft left getting in touch to say this is insulting and sort of pie in the sky thinking like, we are not going to let this happen. So they're kind of determined not to let it happen, but still, who's the candidate?
Yeah. And who is the candidate?
So I think it's too long, didn't read Angela Rayner. Probably, with a big question mark over, like that's still like just the question mark that is always there about whether she really wants it. But, I mean, I guess on the case for, she's been on the backbenches, keeping a low profile after the difficulties around her tax affairs and leaving the cabinet. She, I think, is pretty angry about the way she would see it as like Rachel Reeves getting preferential treatment to her and a bit more support when Rachel Reeves was in hot water over another issue around her property. And she's been watching Wes Streeting seemingly being on manoeuvres, and she has told friends that she would stand to stop Wes, or certainly her friends have been given the impression that she would stand to stop him. But there is always this thing with Angela Rayner, which predates all of this. Like, even when Keir Starmer was doing well in the polls, everyone would sort of wonder when the time came if she would really want to be Prime Minister, because there's this feeling among a lot of people in the Labour Party that if she went for it, she would win, that she has the advantage with the membership. She's got like huge support in the parliamentary party. She's just seen as a sort of really unique, talented politician. But she has a kind of colourful private life. She's faced a lot of intrusion into her privacy, particularly around her kids. I think that's been quite difficult. There are also threats to her safety. And these are things that all politicians face, but I think it's particularly acute for Angela Rayner. And so this genuine feeling with, like, when you speak to people close to her, where they think, it's just if and when the time comes, she'll have to make a really personal call about whether she really wants to go for it. I think it's still in the balance. But in this context where Wes Streeting is looking a bit unstoppable, he's sort of out in front, definitely I'm being told that she would stand to stop him.
It's really interesting because we've been talking about these two people, Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner, quite different politics, quite different personalities. But the things they have in common, Rachel, are the things that the Labour Party, or at least the top, the top people of the Labour Party seem to be missing, which is talking like a human being and a bit of charisma and sounding sort of normal and approachable and
being able
relatable.
to communicate.
Yeah.
Being able to communicate. They both actually, they do come from different traditions of the Labour Party, but they both have quite powerful origin stories, I guess, as politicians. And they are people who come from backgrounds where people can relate to them and they understand where they're coming from. I mean, theoretically, Keir Starmer should have that too.
Yeah,
given
he also
his
has
family
quite an
background.
Extraordinary story.
He
doesn't
does, but he can't tell it, or he does tell it, and he tells it weirdly, and you still get more than half the people don't know what his dad did for a living, which I just think is an important thing to keep in mind when we're like, why do politicians always repeat the same things and the same things and the same things? Listeners, if you are, in the higher proportion of political awareness. So yeah, they can communicate, they can tell a good story, and Labour really needs that. If you look at like the challenges they're facing, like, yes, they're big policy challenges, but it's also about not being able to explain, we are here, we want to get here, there is going to be pain and bumps along the road, but stay with us because this is the story that we're telling as a nation. Like, none of that really fits together with what Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are doing, which sort of makes people go, what's the point of you? And crucially, which I know you've looked at, Anoosh, this idea of who are you for?
Yeah.
Which is just toxic for politicians. The other thing I thought was interesting, though, just on potential people that those in the Labour Party like, is Labour List do their, I think it's monthly cabinet rankings. Con Home used to do it, actually still does it for the Tories, and they've picked it up. And Wes Streeting is not the most popular on that by any means. He's more popular than Reeves and Starmer, but John Healey is ahead of him. Bridget Phillipson and Lisa Nandy are both ahead of him. And right at the top, it always is Ed Miliband, who the party just loves, who I know has ruled himself out, said he's done the job once, he doesn't want to do it again. But there's this like weird Ed-loving resurgence going on. Yeah. And I wonder if like some of that is because he's ruled himself out, or some of it is because he's been able to make his department and his brief energy, like, because he's not involved so much in the do I want the top job, he's kind of really focused on that and making an impact there. But I do think it's fascinating. Like, the public has changed their mind about Ed Miliband.
Or the Labour members have changed their mind about him. But there is also polling, to burst the Ed bubble slightly, that suggests that when Labour members are then asked if he should be leader, the support drops. They just love him, but doing that energy brief and sort of being influential and
maybe being a kingmaker or queenmaker.
But I think you're totally right that this buzz around him has not ended with him ruling himself out. I think ruling yourself out, if you're Ed Miliband, is like the smart thing to do. But I guess there's like just a little glance to camera with that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people who I've spoken to seem convinced that if Keir Starmer stands down, he's the one who stands to be the most likely replacement, which kind of sounds crazy because, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing twice and expecting a different result.
Well, Andy Burnham's done the same thing twice and is expecting a different result. So
we'll come on to him. But yeah, the theory is that, you know, suddenly after the May elections, Keir Starmer sort of decides to do the honourable thing we were talking about in the first half of the podcast and stands down himself. Wes Streeting doesn't have that support from the soft left. Angela Rayner's not ready for it for various reasons. And then it's just Ed Miliband there. And Andy Burnham hasn't been able to find a seat, obviously, in that time.
Well, yeah. And to add to your point, Rachel, about there being sort of this buzz around him, he spoke at our Christmas party.
Yeah, he
gave
did
a very good speech.
It was very funny.
Very funny, pretty rousing, but sort of... Yeah, I can't do a good impression of it, but it was good. I promise listeners.
I think I'm over my days of doing impressions of Ed Miliband on the New Statesman podcast.
He was sort of just talking about fatalism and, you know, and Labour tackling child poverty, and the Labour people in the room. Obviously, he doesn't, you know, he's a Marmite figure. Parts of the Labour Party don't necessarily love an Ed Miliband speech, but a lot of Labour people just absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And he has been on a little bit of a circuit. He was at the Welsh Labour Gala dinner or whatever it was called a few evenings ago. He is seen as this person with a sort of an energy around him, energy secretary.
No pun intended.
And so, I mean... I think, like, what I write in the column is that, you know, he kind of hopes to provide the ideas behind any future leader. A lot of his positioning looks like he's going for the Chancellor job if Rachel Reeves is fired, or more likely under a new leader. But I also, I think the idea of as you describe, Anoosh, the possibility of him actually ending up as leader is absolutely not impossible.
Yeah. And actually, in a way, he's already... very influential. I mean, when I was watching the budget, and I don't know whether this is because the 2015 general election was sort of a formative election for me, because it was the first one that I covered as a political journalist. It really struck me as sort of a Milibandian budget, you know, that mansion tax. And there's all sorts of other examples of things that, you know, could be picked out of the 2015 manifesto and kind of the Ed Miliband view of the world. And it was, you know, billed by the Chancellor and Number 10 as a Labour budget, you know, especially to please Labour MPs who haven't been that happy. So it is interesting. There's kind of Milibandism in the air, isn't there? And let's talk about Andy Burnham as well, because he is the other name that gets mentioned the most among Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner. Has he sort of blown himself up with that intervention that he made before conference, Ailbhe, or is he still very much someone who could come through?
You're basically saying, did Tom McTague ruin it for him?
Yeah.
It was the New Statesman all along.
No. Self-immolation.
I definitely don't think that his New Statesman interview has been an issue. I mean, people might say it, but I mean, if anything, it has given some clarity that he would love to come back, basically. I think just the issue is that he doesn't have a seat in Parliament. And that was the reality then. It's still the reality now. I mean, I quote someone in the column on the NEC who says it wouldn't be impossible. You know, if someone stood down, you know, it's not impossible for him actually to be selected as the candidate and to... But, you know,
that's really interesting from the NEC, isn't it? Because that's the body that decides these rules.
But still unlikely, just not literally impossible. But it is such a difficult route to get back. And, you know, like Clive Lewis, who said on TV that he would consider, or that he would hypothetically give up his seat for him.
Norfolk.
He wrote for us this week, just like sort of explaining what he meant by that. But even Clive Lewis, I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, like what didn't seriously mean that. It was more a clarion call, can someone please give up their seat for Andy Burnham? And, you know, a signal that he's unhappy with the leadership and would prefer Andy Burnham. But it's not his seat to give up. You know, I mean, he can give it up, but he can't dictate who would get it next. His local members would need to have a say in it, but also the NEC. And does the incumbent Keir Starmer really want his old friend Andy Burnham coming back into Parliament? You know, it would be a really odd set of events. And, you know, one person said to me, it was sort of as though Andy Burnham is trying to brief something into existence, like by talking about it.
Manifesting.
Yeah, manifest. But it's just so difficult. And so it's still feeling unlikely, even though there is support for Andy Burnham among Labour MPs.
Yeah, and I've heard another theory from someone close to Mainstream, which is the sort of Burnham-aligned movement within Labour, although that's sort of denied by them, that he could, if he does get denied a seat or isn't able to get onto a seat as a Labour candidate, he could run as an independent candidate in a by-election, Ken Livingstone style, and then get embraced by Labour once he reaches Parliament. Which, I mean, obviously, these are all kind of crazy options, but politics is in a bit of a volatile, crazy place.
Well, the other thing I was going to say about him getting a seat is even if he gets through all those hurdles, somebody stands down, the NEC say it's okay, Keir Starmer says it's okay, Labour members support him, he's still then only the candidate, then he's got to fight a by-election. And yes, he is very popular in his patch, but you just know that Reform are going to throw literally everything they have at that. And that is also a risk, like nothing is certain. So that would be pretty major break on his ambitions if he went through all of that and then Nigel Farage was able to get out the vote in whatever that seat was and block him at that stage.
Yeah. And how different, I mean, I'm really interested in how different the government would be under each of these potential new leaders, So is Wes Streeting seen as a continuity candidate? Would he carry things on the way that they are? He's very high up in the cabinet. Would Angela Rayner take them in a different direction? She's trying to make sure that the workers' rights package isn't diluted any more than it already has been. Andy Burnham obviously has this whole other idea, rewiring the state and a different way of running the economy. Is Wes Streeting's kind of place within the cabinet something that, is a hurdle to him because of that?
So I think that so we've talked about Wes Streeting and Angela Rayner and a few other people. There are loads of other names of people in cabinet who aren't soft left or Wes Streeting, who I didn't mention, but are sort of...
Is one of them Shabana Mahmood?
But, John Healey, there's so many people, Bridget Phillipson, Darren Jones, there's so many people who might be thinking about this. So I don't just mean Wes Streeting or Angela Rayner when I say this, but I think for anyone with sort of leadership ambitions or thinking about how the next year might go, I think this is the big consideration. Because I think they will all be caught between wanting to signal change and a break from what's not been working with Keir Starmer, without being such a big change that you're breaking the manifesto and you don't have democratic legitimacy, because you don't want to be forced to call an election or for that call from the Tories to be too big, or just to just be seen by voters to be breaking with what they voted for in the first place. So I think, and they will all want to say we're delivering the change that you voted for, and they might be just all tied in by the manifesto, which to me is like the most significant thing. Like the economic position is still really difficult. Rachel Reeves has boxed the Labour Party and government in just like massively with those tax pledges. You have this Labour government that kind of can't really raise revenue. It's like desperate for growth. It's not getting it. It did the last budget, but hasn't been able to just do like a broad-based tax increase to fund the things it wants to do. They've got these plans penciled in to, freeze income tax thresholds that's going to come in right before an election. Then you've got these spending cuts that are penciled in, which will be really, really difficult. Like whoever becomes Labour leader will have to reckon with that, or just be praying for growth and be a bit luckier than the government has been so far. So I think they're all kind of working that out. So I can't give you a clear answer on like what they are all thinking, but there's definitely a lot of thinking behind the scenes about how do you get that balance right between the change but not too much change.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying, Rachel, about, what is the Labour Party for? They kind of have to be on brand, don't they, in order for voters to get what they expect from them.
Yeah, one of the damaging mistakes I think that they made is they watched David Cameron and George Osborne do the Labour crash the economy, there's no money left thing for like a decade, not specifically Cameron and Osborne, but the Tories. It was very, very effective messaging for them. And they tried to do the same thing, and voters got sick of it within like months, weeks even. And I've spoken to political analysts who've done focus groups and polling on this, and the suggestion is, like, one, voters are tired of that message, but two, I think this is more fundamental, they kind of expect the Conservatives to make tough choices on the economy, and they expect Labour to invest lots of money in public services. So if you are trying to do something that goes against type, you don't get very much sympathy for it. And it was a sort of misunderstanding of how voters viewed a successful Labour government that's now very, very difficult to undo. Now, I have a theory that I think would be completely impossible to work out in practice, but I wonder if were Rachel Reeves, I mean, I can't go back in time a week and a half to the budget, but if she were to break the manifesto pledge and increase income tax, I don't think her position is tenable. I think she would have to go. I think Keir Starmer would have to go too, because I don't think he's strong enough to survive losing a chancellor, which is a very difficult thing for a prime minister to do in normal circumstances. But make the decision, they go, they fall on their swords, you then get somebody new in who goes, I'm not the one who broke the manifesto pledge. However, now the manifesto pledge has been broken, I'm going to use that money to do X, Y, Z. We've got 3.5 years before an election. We can actually turn things around. And the toxicity of that decision is on the people who've gone. Do we have politicians who sort of take one for the team or the country? Like, generally not. So I can't see it playing out in practice. But when I imagine a sort of, how would I fix this in theory, that's the direction I go down.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think there is an increased understanding within number 10 and number 11 about this, you know, what people actually expect of a Labour government thing. I think the lifting of the 2-child cap is an example of that, because while it's pretty popular among the public, what's very unpopular is the idea of a Labour government presiding over a country where child poverty goes up, because it's just not what you expect from them. There was a similar dynamic with the winter fuel allowance cut. You know, that's just not what you expect a Labour government to do. Whether or not you agree with it, kind of, like whether or not you were ever a Labour voter, it's just not what you expect. So I think there's sort of a brand thing going on there. And lastly, Ailbhe, Angela Rayner's not going to appear on I'm a Celeb anytime soon, I hear. From your column.
No, she got the call. Yeah, she did.
She didn't want to eat kangaroo testicles.
What a loss to TV.
I know, that would have been so good.
I know. I mean, we get to keep her in politics. But she would have been
with
great on
Farage,
it.
we got both.
Lucky us. And, you know, she would have gone in that great tradition of Matt Hancock. And but yeah, she
Nadine
got the call
Dorris.
to go into
Nadine Dorris did it.
Yeah, she got the call to go into the jungle right
Yeah.
after she was right after she resigned from cabinet, but she ruled it out. And
She wanted her dignity.
well, she's just not done with politics. You know, I think if you want the clearest indication of where Angela Rayner is on this looming leadership question, it's the I'm a Celeb decision. You know, she would be a different kind of politician if she went on that show. But if you still have an inkling that, you know, you could become Prime Minister, I think it's not what you do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, she's not finished. And, you know, it's a sort of a difficult time for her. The HMRC back and forth isn't finished yet. So she's not doing that much publicly. But she's almost been dragged back into the conversation by people like us earlier than she probably would have expected, because there's all this leadership speculation and things are so febrile, but also because there was this U-turn on part of the workers' rights stuff. And you just had this moment last week where if you spoke to Labour MPs, a lot of them were just saying, I need to speak to Angela. Like, everyone looks to her for leadership on this kind of thing.
Yeah, like this would never have happened if she was still around.
But properly, like, we're going to talk to Angela over the weekend. You know, she still has this big leadership role to play. So she's sort of preventing a rebellion, but also kind of strong-arming the government into implementing her beloved workers' rights policies sooner.
Yeah.
And sort of putting up this kind of fight to make sure that there isn't more that's watered down. Because I think that's really what's behind all of this. It's not that there has been this U-turn or concession to get this through the House of Lords. It's this kind of bigger worry. Some would say paranoia, but this like bigger worry in parts of the Labour Party that actually the government is preparing to water down loads of this Angela Rayner plan that the trade unions are like really supportive of, that was in the manifesto. And so they're kind of mounting this big fight on that. But it means that Angela Rayner is assuming a leadership role on that from the backbenches, probably sooner than she would have planned too. And she's just re-establishing herself. I think there'll be more plans for her to, you know, speak a bit more publicly and maybe give more interviews next year. But first and foremost, she just sort of wants to get on with the job as a backbencher. But because she's Angela Rayner, she's still, you know, everyone's sort of watching her every move, and she's still sort of demonstrating the big following that she has and her organising power.